Richard, Rebecca, thank you very much for having us back, Cathay Pacific and me, to talk. It's a distinguished group of speakers you have today. Deputy Commissioner, nice to be on the same bill as you, and other speakers here today. You're going to hear a lot of interesting things. So I have to give you a health warning, first of all. I'm not a logistics guy. I'm one of those really annoying people, one of those generalists who makes all the promises that you then have to deliver. The logistics guys have to deliver. But I wanted to start actually with a good logistics story for the Philippines. You know, the mission of CEO Forum is to nation build and to tell good stories about the Philippines. So last night I flew in from Hong Kong, very late, the last Cathay Pacific flight, which arrived at the doors opened at 11:34 last night in the evening, and I live in BGC. How long do you think it took me to get home from the airport yesterday? From the doors opening, not even out the airport. 2 hours? Who said 2 hours? You've had that experience? We've all had that experience, haven't you? Who said 40 minutes? 45 minutes? It was 45 minutes. It was actually a bit under 45 minutes. From the doors opening to me getting home to my family and to my bed, to get some rest for today. Now that's the sort of time that people think about when it comes to Singapore, when it comes to Hong Kong. It's not the sort of time that we normally associate with the Philippines. I had a friend who I was meeting for a drink last Friday, and he got off the plane at 7 o'clock in the evening on Friday to come into BGC. How long did it take him to get to BGC to have a beer with me? 3 hours. It was 3 hours. So therein lies some of the challenges that we have in the Philippines, right? We have it can work, but it can sometimes not work, and when it goes wrong, it can go really wrong. So what happened well last night was there were no queues at immigration, there was no queues at customs, the traffic was relatively low, and so it all worked seamlessly. And when it's like that, logistics is a breeze, it's a dream in the Philippines, but it can go the other way too. So I hope that we can all hear solutions today about how we can help good outcomes from logistics experiences in the Philippines. A challenging logistics experience today, I'm sure, will be the Miss Universe pageant through Makati. I'm very impressed you're all here and you're not lining the streets of Makati, ready to catch a glimpse of your new Miss Universe. But that will create some challenges this afternoon for anyone wanting to get around. So so the health warning is I'm not a pure logistics guy, but I do want to give you an update on some of the world of logistics that we're seeing from an air carrier point of view. Okay? Industry-wide, our freight ton kilometers have been growing. So people have been adding capacity, and a couple of times last year that capacity started to exceed demand for the first time in about 2 years. So cargo has been growing significantly year on year for a couple of years. And 2017 was a strong growth, 2018 was a strong growth too. So that's good news for all of us sitting around here. It's generally profitable growth too. The growth is matched by rate increases and by generally kind of the ecosystem producing a better return for the players. When we look at the regions, and I'm reading off this slide at the back, so I hope my glasses work. We're in the right place. Asia Pacific, we know, is the engine of growth around air cargo. And so congratulations to us, and Rebecca talked about Philippines being sort of a center for growth and for Asian development, and we are in the right sort of place to see global growth happening on our doorstep, and Philippines is very much part of that. Much better growth rates than elsewhere in the world. So what does that mean in terms of opportunities and challenges? The World Trade Outlook Indicator is showing above trend for the next year as well. Certainly the last couple of years have been above trend. And China is that story. Now China has had some wobbles, and it is continuing to have a bit of a wobble, but it's still a huge engine for growth. Okay, so through 2018, those export volumes, again, up 24%, huge sort of growth we're seeing there in terms of export volumes. But interestingly, import volumes are growing as well. And that's one of the big differences that have happened over the last few years, that China is a consumer as well as a producer. It's been happening now for a decade or so, but you're really seeing that growth happen. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of the e-trade. So e-commerce, I think e-commerce will come up time and time again today, because that's really the key to this growth in air cargo, but also logistics growth. And you saw some of the snippets from last year's conference where they were talking about that being a driver, increasingly so. So we're sort of seeing between 2017 and 2021, this is going to more than double this component of sort of global e-commerce sales, and that's just that may even be conservative. I think with the rapid growth of Lazada in markets like the Philippines, some of those numbers weren't really considered when the 2017 data was being put together. So I think that may be conservative, even a doubling. It might go quicker. What you're seeing in this slide is a difference between cross-border and domestic. Domestic demand in places like the US, places like China, is still driving the lion's share, but international cross-border e-commerce is growing quickly, and that's obviously of interest to players like Cathay Pacific. We like to hear that, and we are very much part of that growth. So, yeah, cross-border e-commerce will be about a quarter of that market overall, which means all of you involved in domestic e-commerce logistics have got a very, very bright future going ahead for the Philippines too, because it's growing quicker than the international. So what are we seeing in terms of the size of the market? So traditionally we think America is a very large market, but in terms of e-commerce it's the other way around. So China, 2.5 times the e-commerce size of America. This is where the action is really, it's China. And if you look at the rates of growth, I'm trying to find the laser. Oh, it's not going to work. So you've got significant growth, which means that China will very quickly accelerate away from America in terms of e-commerce volumes. Now there's a shift happening in America too, in terms of moving away from the mall, the strip mall, and the hard retail to e-commerce, but it's not happening nearly as quickly as it is in China. So players like Cathay Pacific that are based in Hong Kong on the doorstep of China really see this as a very, very exciting indeed. So Hong Kong was already the busiest cargo hub in the world before the kind of e-commerce revolution of the last decade, but now it's really cementing that and growing quickly as it is a logistics hub for in and out from China. Okay, so number one air cargo hub. And if we're thinking about what makes a successful cargo hub, if the Philippines want to move into this space in the future, there's a couple of key things. So tax-free for imports, exports, and transshipments. The level of tax, interestingly, when they took the tax off wine in Hong Kong, volumes grew hundreds of % over time, and everybody bought into that success. That's just one example of the tax regime that's sympathetic to logistics and import and export business. All right, consolidation, you have to have very slick consolidation facilities. Hong Kong, we have a problem with space. As you may know, it's a very tight space. Everyone's building on landfill. So when we built our cargo terminal, for example, we didn't have the space to build a huge consolidation facility horizontally, so we built it vertically. And that's the kind of innovation, the innovation involved in building a vertically integrated consolidation and hub rather than traditionally just sort of spreading out, meant that actually it generated a huge amount of efficiencies because you're not traveling lots of space. So very important. Proximity to China, and Philippines does have proximity to China. So this is something that we can use in this market. Customs efficiency, we have that here, and in Hong Kong, incredible customs efficiency in terms of making sure all and any bureaucratic hurdles that can be reduced are there, and that everything's done online and as efficiently as possible. Airport efficiency, so I just talked about getting through the airport in no time at all. I'm sure for some of the I didn't have to pick up a bag yesterday, but baggage systems can slow things down. Moving cargo through the different parts of the airport can slow things down a little bit in many airports around the world, and that's something that we need to look at. And when they're designing new airports, I urge them to have a think about the cargo dimension to any new airport facility. It's incredibly important to put that into the planning section. And I know the Bulacan guys, for example, are doing that already. Interestingly, that Hong Kong will be building a purpose e-commerce facility up and ready by 2023. So they're seeing this as a distinct niche that they will be building towards. Okay. This is a sob story about how hard it is to make money in Hong Kong. You probably don't want to hear that, given our announcement yesterday. But Hong Kong as a hub is more expensive than places like Singapore or Shanghai because of rents, etc., like that. So that means that we and those players in Hong Kong have to be ever more efficient to try and make that work for us. And the TSA requirements, all the increased screening, etc., for any transshipment that comes from areas that are not downline TSA approved, means that that is quite an onerous process to go through. It needs to be done very efficiently. So what are the key benefits of air freight e-commerce as it relates to air freight? Well, one of them is the demand of the customer. They want things yesterday. And so aviation is well set to deliver a speedy response relative to the other modes of cargo delivery. So that's a big tick for us. Thankfully, it's year-round demand. Although, the Singles Day in China, or the Black Friday, or the Tech Friday, all these things are kind of spiky, but actually e-commerce is much more seasonally balanced than other traditional cargo flows, which is fantastic for air carriers. Equally, the balance of trade, with China and Southeast Asia becoming consumers as much as producers. Traditionally, aircraft would go across the Pacific full to America, and then come back empty. And that's a very expensive way to run a business, sort of one-way head haul. Now it's both-way head hauls, and that means that you can actually make money out of a cargo operation. So e-commerce has really been a boon to the cargo industry, and we're seeing that now. The downsides are that it's disparate. There's lots of different packages, all different sizes, going in different directions, needing different handling. So some of the economies of scale that you would normally expect from having large cargo operations of consolidation are not captured in the e-commerce trade. Those large number of heterogeneous shipments are a problem, and you need to have very good logistic solutions for that. Okay, the impact of trade wars, what are we seeing there? I'd be interested to hear your views on this. Didn't really impact 2018 numbers. It's starting to bite in 2019, and we're going to see some impact. Sea trade talking about 1.2%. Depends how it escalates. There are a number of China has actually released some trade tariffs in order to make the impact on the consumer less. So you don't hear that in the media, that China are actually reducing some tariffs, but the escalation between America and China will have an impact. We haven't seen it yet, but it's starting to bite. All right, interestingly, there are opportunities. So let's take, for example, the opportunity of cherries going from America to China, very big market there. If the tariffs are in place such that this market that is no longer available, well, there are other countries that grow cherries that would be very interested in selling into China, and that represents an opportunity for players in this market, in this part of the world. So it's not all doom and gloom. The Chinese will still eat their cherries, and where are they going to get them from? They'll get them from the hills of Vietnam or the farms in the Cameron Highlands. They'll get them from somewhere, and we need to be able to, as an industry, need to respond to those changing demands. Okay? All right, fuel price. It's some significant increase in fuel price over the last year. Fuel price for an airline, I don't know what it is as a percentage of your costs, but for an airline it can be up to 50%. So 50% of your cost is largely out of your control. You might make a bet on a hedge, but frankly that's gambling. And there's a lot of very sad faces outside here who are trying to make money from gambling and not being successful. And we lost a lot of money over the last few years, Cathay Pacific, for some very expensive and ill-advised hedges. They were very well advised at the time, but markets change. So fuel factors are a consideration in terms of how the industry can respond. But 40, you saw the low in 2016, more than double that already. So if you were pricing your business and trying to work out how to make money in 2014, already that cost base is double and it's going up. Okay, so who is making the margin? Gross yields for aviation have been going down on the passenger side and on the cargo side, multi-year, multi-decade. Yields have been coming down. There's been a little bit of an increase in the last year, both in passenger and in cargo, but it ain't airlines that are making the money, so I hope you guys are. So I hope someone is, because it isn't airlines. The prices are coming down, the savings are being passed on in general to the customers. But the overall trend is definitely a declining yield in air rates. What's also interesting is the change in business. Who here heard about Airbus scrapping the 380 this week? It's a big call, right? That was their big project to industrialize and put to scale both cargo and passenger. Right, but it was never going to work. A very heavy aircraft with 4 heavy engines when you can take almost as many people and almost as much cargo with a 2-engined aircraft now with the technology. And what the designers didn't figure out there is the importance of air cargo to every passenger route. So Cathay Pacific makes about 30% of its revenues from the cargo business. And there are many passenger routes that would be unprofitable without the cargo element to it. So whenever someone designs a new aircraft, they have to take into account how much cargo they can get into the belly space. And for us, the revenue might be 30%, but a lot more than 30% of the profit is from the cargo operation. So air cargo, absolutely vital to any dual-purpose carrier. And what we've seen here now is that there was a big glut of deliveries of freighters, so purpose-built cargo aircraft, from 2012 to about 2016. That's really dropping off now. Basically, the technology is such that you can take a full load of passengers and a lot of cargo in the same plane, and therefore pass those savings on to customers, make a bit of margin back. So you see freighters dropping off there on the 2017 to 2021 deliveries down to about half of the percentage, from 43, 44 down to about 24. So a real drop-off in freighter deliveries, and we expect that to continue. Interesting trend. Be interesting to hear from FedEx whether they see that happening, actually. Okay, how am I doing for time? Am I done? All right? So I consciously try to not do the hard sell for Cathay Pacific, but there is, so what does an airline do to differentiate in a very busy space with lots of competition? So I will go through a few bits and pieces here. Founded in 1946, a lovely story about Cathay Pacific in the Philippines. Our first flight was a cargo flight into Manila. In 1946, they were using the old DC-3s from the Second World War. They flew into Manila, what is now Ayala Avenue. The terminal is the Blackbird restaurant. You all know that? That's the kind of Nielsen Tower. Pilots got out of that. They were flying chicks up from a very long, circuitous route up from Sydney. Poor birds, they must have survived somehow. And the pilots, pretty tired after that, so they went off to the Manila hotel. In the bar, they thought, well, we're now flying revenue, passengers and cargo around. We better call ourselves something. And they thought they wanted to fly across the Pacific eventually. So that's where the Pacific came from. And Cathay was this kind of notion about being involved in China, next to China, part of China, and the Orient. So the name Cathay Pacific was born in the jungle bar of the Manila Hotel in 1946. So, and our first commercial flight was to the Philippines. So very, very close relationship that Cathay Pacific has with the Philippines over the years. We're a big player in cargo. But we need to differentiate, right? We can't just rest on those great history. What are we doing to try and make things, make ourselves relevant to the industry now? Digital has to play a part. It has to be. We have to be industry leading in terms of our push into running our business digitally, using the data and encouraging our customers to do the same. We're still a very paper-intensive industry in aviation, and we need to do more and more to try and drive all of that out. So on the fleet and network side, you'll see here the impact of reducing freighter deliveries and increasing the passenger side. So that even the new A321s, the NEOs, have cargo capacity. One of the big problems we have from Davao or Clark, for example, is the plane, a 320, fills up with passengers and their bags, especially their balikbayan, for all their gifts, for especially coming in to the Philippines over Christmas. No space at all for cargo. And these markets like Davao has got a huge cargo market that we can't service from our 320 flight going in there. All right? So we're upgrading those. They will have cargo capacity. They were just taking delivery of the A350-1000s. Philippine Airlines have got A350s in as well. We're taking the 1000, which is a stretch version, more cargo capacity, essentially. These new routes are all about being a bit more opportunistic. So you see Davao there. We started Davao last year. But we're also starting Washington, Seattle. And these are as much cargo routes as they are passenger routes. We will choose a route based on the dynamics between passenger and cargo. So offering those extra frequencies to places. This is where the real differentiation happens. It's on how do you split your product up to make it relevant to the customers. And the temperature-controlled one is a particular one. Does anybody know that the first Philippine Madame Tussauds waxwork is going to be Pia Würzburg, and she'll be launched in Hong Kong. The waxwork will be launched in Hong Kong later this month. And we're flying the waxwork that's been made in London to the Philippines for a launch in a week or so's time. Now, it's pretty important that that has temperature control right the way through its journey. Otherwise, poor Pia is going to turn up and her ears are off and her nose is saggy, and she won't look her best if the temperature control isn't there. And so sensitive cargoes are a real differentiator for us. We know how to do that, and we do it well. All right, I'm very, very quickly going to skip through. We are the industry leader in EAir Waybills because we see that very much driving value for our customers, and we work with them on a partnership level to drive EAir Waybills through the supply chain. And in terms of e-freight volume, we are the industry leader. Okay, working with other partners as well. Air Hong Kong, which was until recently a joint venture with DHL, now wholly owned by Cathay Pacific Group, flies into Manila on a daily basis and services other parts of the business, and we work with other partners. That's our cargo terminal. I've taken my time, so I'll just go on to the last piece, which is sustainable development. We don't see it so much here, but there is strong demand growing in other parts of the world for us to be able to show that we run our business sustainably with consideration for the environmental footprint. Okay? The license to operate that Cathay Pacific has, or any airline, will be impacted in the coming years as climate science gets more sophisticated, and we know the impact of releasing gases at 35,000 feet in the air. We don't really know that at the moment. So we're using biofuels, and we're doing things like not allowing trophy hunters to bring their kind of shot giraffe back to their country. So we take this very seriously, and it's very much a part of our social responsibility to ensure that we operate responsibly, and will continue to do so. Hopefully that can be something that you can feel good and part of when you work with us. So that's me, that's done. You've got a fantastic day, a busy day ahead. I'll be around for some questions later. Happy to meet anyone. Thank you again for having me to speak, and good luck with your day.